When I discovered my wife sleeping with her boss, I didn't scream or cry. I methodically destroyed their careers, reputations, and futures while they never saw it coming. Watch until the end, subscribe to the channel, and write where you are watching from in the comments. I never thought I would be the kind of man who would get cheated on. I had always prided myself on being a good husband. I was attentive, loving, and I thought I was giving my wife everything she needed. We had been married for 7 years, and I believed we were happy. Sarah and I met in college, fell in love quickly, and got married 2 years after graduation. We bought a beautiful house in the suburbs. Both had stable jobs and were planning to start a family soon. Everything seemed perfect, until it wasn't. The first signs were subtle. Sarah started working late more often. She became protective of her phone, always keeping it face down and taking it with her everywhere, even to the bathroom. Her passwords changed. She seemed distant, often lost in thought. When I asked if something was wrong, she would smile that rehearsed smile and say everything was fine, just work stress. I remember the first night I truly felt something was wrong. We were having dinner at our favorite Italian restaurant, celebrating our anniversary. 7 years together, and I had planned everything meticulously, reservations at the place where we had our first date, the same wine we'd shared that night, even arranging for the pianist to play the song that was playing when I proposed. I had spent weeks planning this evening, wanting it to be perfect, but Sarah seemed elsewhere. She checked her phone 17 times during dinner. Yes, I counted. Her smile never quite reached her eyes, and when I reached across the table to take her hand, there was a split-second hesitation before she reciprocated. It was brief, but it was there. A moment of reluctance that pierced straight through my heart. "Is everything okay?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. "Of course," she said, that same rehearsed smile appearing on her face. "Just a big project at work. James has us all working overtime to meet the deadline." James, her boss. She had mentioned him more and more frequently in recent months, always in a professional context, always with a casual tone. But something about the way she said his name made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. I wanted to believe her, I really did, but the knot in my stomach grew tighter with each passing day. The next few weeks, I started paying more attention. Sarah's late nights became more frequent. Twice a week became 3 times, then 4. Her excuses were always the same: work, deadlines, team meetings that ran long. I offered to bring her dinner at the office one night just to surprise her, and the panic that flashed across her face was unmistakable. No, don't do that," she said quickly. "The office is a mess and we're all stressed. I wouldn't want you to see me like that." I nodded and dropped the subject, but a cold feeling settled in my chest. That night, after she left for another late meeting, I did something I'd never done before. I checked our cell phone records online. There it was, hundreds of text messages and dozens of calls to the same number at all hours of the day and night, early mornings before I woke up, late at night after she thought I was asleep, during the workday, during weekends when she said she was shopping with friends. I didn't recognize the number, but I knew in my gut who it belonged to. I sat in our home office for hours that night, staring at those call logs, feeling my world crumbling around me. When Sarah came home near midnight, I had closed the laptop and gone to bed, pretending to be asleep. She slipped in beside me, not even attempting to wake me for a good-night kiss as she once would have. I felt her settle on her side of the bed, a vast ocean of mattress between us. On a Tuesday evening 2 weeks later, Sarah told me she had an overnight conference for work and wouldn't be home until the following night. It wasn't unusual. She had attended similar events before. I kissed her goodbye and watched as she drove away, unaware that this moment would change everything. That night, I received a call from Mike, one of my closest friends. He worked at the same hotel where Sarah's supposed conference was being held. "Hey, Nathan," Mike's voice was hesitant. "I'm not sure if I should be telling you this, but I just saw Sarah at the hotel." "Yeah, she's there for a conference," I replied, puzzled by his concern. There was a long pause. "Nathan, there's no conference here this week, and she's with someone, a man. They were very close." My heart dropped. The room started spinning. I gripped the kitchen counter to steady myself. "Are you sure it's her?" I asked, knowing it was a stupid question. Mike had known Sarah for years. "I'm sure, man. I'm so sorry. They checked in together. They were kissing in the elevator. I wouldn't tell you if I wasn't absolutely certain." I thanked him, hung up, and sat in silence for what felt like hours. My mind raced with possibilities. Maybe there was an explanation. Maybe it wasn't what it seemed. But deep down, I knew. I didn't confront her when she came home the next day. I watched as she casually mentioned how boring the conference had been, how she was glad to be home. Each lie that fell from her lips felt like a knife twisting in my chest. "How was the keynote speaker?" I asked, testing her. She didn't miss a beat. "Interesting but a bit dry. You know how these industry people can be brilliant but no presentation skills." Another lie, smooth, practiced, effortless. How many times had she lied to me like this, I wondered. How long had this been going on? Instead of confronting her immediately, I decided to gather evidence. It wasn't that I needed proof for myself. Mike's word was enough, but I needed to understand the full scope of her betrayal. How long had this been going on? Who was this man? I hired a private investigator, a former police officer named Ray who specialized in infidelity cases. He was discreet, professional, and thorough. When we met at a coffee shop across town, his eyes held a mix of sympathy and clinical detachment that told me he'd seen this hundreds of times before. "I'll need some basic information," he said, pulling out a notepad. "Your wife's schedule, the suspected person's details if you have them, access to any shared accounts you legally have access to." I provided everything I could. Sarah's work schedule, the mysterious phone number, my suspicions about her boss. Ray nodded, taking notes without judgment. "I'll be in touch within a few days," he said. "In the meantime, act normal. Don't give her any reason to be suspicious. The more comfortable she is, the more careless she'll be." Those next few days were a special kind of hell. I went through the motions of our marriage like an actor in a play. I kissed her goodbye in the mornings. I asked about her day in the evenings. I slept beside her at night, feeling the warmth of her body next to mine and wondering who else had felt that warmth. Within a week, Ray had provided me with all the information I needed, and more than I ever wanted to know. Her lover was indeed James Thompson, her boss at the marketing firm where she worked. Their affair had been going on for nearly 6 months. Ray gave me photos, times, dates, locations, hotel receipts, restaurant bills, a timeline of their relationship that made me physically ill. He even had recordings of their phone conversations that turned my stomach. They laughed about me, they mocked our marriage. "He's so clueless," Sarah had said in one recording, laughing. "He actually believed I was at a marketing conference last month when we were in Cabo. While I was working overtime to save for our future, for the family we had talked about starting, she was on a beach with her boss." The betrayal was so complete, so thorough, that it left me breathless. They discussed a future together after Sarah left me, of course. James had promised her a promotion, a corner office, a life of luxury that apparently I couldn't provide on my software engineer's salary. They had it all planned out. She would ask for a divorce after the holidays, cite irreconcilable differences, blame my work schedule for growing apart. But the most painful revelation was that James wasn't just some random colleague. I had met him several times at company events. He had been to our home for dinner parties. He had shaken my hand and looked me in the eye while sleeping with my wife behind my back. I remembered clearly how he had complimented me on the bourbon I'd served, how he'd laughed at my jokes, how he'd said, "You're a lucky man, Nathan," with his eyes on Sarah. The evidence was overwhelming, but I still wasn't ready to confront Sarah. Not yet. Something inside me had changed. The pain was giving way to something darker, a desire for justice, for revenge. Not just a heated argument or a dramatic scene, but something that would make them both feel the kind of devastation I was experiencing. I spent a night alone in our guest room, surrounded by the photos and transcripts Ray had provided, piecing together the timeline of their betrayal. Every business trip, every late night, every weekend excursion with friends, all of it had been opportunities for them to be together. 6 months of lies, 6 months of making a fool out of me. I started planning meticulously. I opened a new bank account and gradually moved most of our savings into it, not all at once, but in increments that wouldn't raise red flags. I spoke with a divorce lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman named Melissa who listened to my story with professional interest and assured me that infidelity would work in my favor in our no-fault state, especially with the evidence I had. "Document everything," she advised, "and don't move out of the house no matter what." That could be construed as abandonment. I secured all our important documents, birth certificates, property deeds, investment portfolios. I researched the company where Sarah and James worked, learning about their policies regarding workplace relationships, especially between managers and subordinates. As I suspected, the company had strict rules against supervisors dating their direct reports. It was considered an abuse of power, a conflict of interest, and grounds for immediate termination. I dug deeper into James's background. He was 42, 10 years older than Sarah and me. He had worked at the company for 15 years, climbing the corporate ladder with ruthless efficiency. He was married to Catherine Thompson, a pediatric nurse at the local hospital. They had no children. I found her on social media, saw pictures of their vacations, their anniversary celebrations. I wondered if she suspected anything, if she felt the same knot in her stomach that I had felt. All the while, I maintained the facade of the oblivious, loving husband. I came home with flowers. I cooked dinner. I listened to her lies about late meetings and weekend work commitments. I kissed her goodbye when she left to meet him, tasting the bile that rose in my throat. One night, as we lay in bed, Sarah reached for me, initiating intimacy for the first time in months. I almost refused the thought of touching her. Knowing where she had been, who she had been with, made me physically ill. But refusing would have raised suspicions. So I went through the motions, feeling nothing but disgust and a deepening resolve to make her pay for every lie, every betrayal. 3 weeks after Mike's call, I was ready. On a Friday morning, I called in sick to work. After Sarah left for the office, I packed all her things, every piece of clothing, every book, every trinket and memento. I carefully boxed up photos of us, keeping only those I wanted for myself. I removed her from our joint accounts, credit cards, insurance policies, systematically erasing her from our shared life. It took all day. By late afternoon, our bedroom closet was empty of her clothes. Her vanity was cleared of her makeup and perfumes. Her bookshelves were bare. The framed photos of her family were wrapped and boxed. I labeled each box meticulously: clothes, books, personal items. A life reduced to cardboard containers stacked in our living room. Then I waited. Sarah came home at her usual time, calling out my name as she entered. She found me sitting calmly in the living room, surrounded by boxes of her belongings. "What's going on?" she asked, her face a mixture of confusion and the first flickers of fear. Without a word, I handed her a manila envelope. Inside were copies of the photos, the transcripts of conversations, the hotel receipts, a carefully curated showcase of her betrayal. She flipped through them, her face draining of color. "Nathan, I can explain." "No need," I cut her off, my voice steady. "I've heard all your explanations already, in detail. You and James have quite a way with words. He's so clueless, right? That's what you said about me." Her eyes widened with recognition. "You had me followed. Does it matter? Would it change anything if I'd discovered your affair some other way?" She started crying then, those tears I once would have done anything to stop. Now they meant nothing to me. "It was a mistake," she sobbed. "It didn't mean anything. I love you, Nathan. Please, we can work through this. We can go to counseling. I'll quit my job. I'll do anything." I looked at her, really looked at her. The woman I had loved for nearly a decade, the woman I had planned to have children with, to grow old with, she was a stranger to me now. "Do you love him?" I asked quietly. She hesitated, just for a moment, but it was enough. "No," she said, but the damage was done. I stood up slowly. "Your things are packed. I've removed you from all our accounts. The divorce papers are on top of that box by the door. My lawyer will be in touch with the rest. You have 30 minutes to take what you can and leave. The rest will be donated." "You can't do this." Her voice rose, panic replacing the tears. "This is my house too. You can't just throw me out." "Actually, it's not," I replied. "It's in my name. Check the deed if you don't believe me. We decided that when we bought it, remember, for tax purposes." She hadn't remembered. I could see the realization dawning on her face. In that moment, I felt nothing, not satisfaction, not anger, just emptiness. "Where am I supposed to go?" she whispered. "I'm sure James has room for you," I said. "You two seem to have it all figured out. The promotions, the corner office, the life of luxury he promised you. Time to cash in on those promises." Her face crumpled again. "Nathan, please, I made a mistake. Everyone makes mistakes. 7 years together, doesn't that mean anything to you?" "It meant everything to me," I replied. "But apparently it meant nothing to you. 30 minutes, Sarah, then I'm changing the locks." As she scrambled to gather her most important possessions, making frantic calls on her phone, I added one final twist to my plan. I sent an email to the HR department at their company, copying in several executives and board members. Attached were select photos and evidence of their affair, along with a polite note explaining that, as the husband of an employee being taken advantage of by her superior, I felt obligated to bring this violation of company policy to their attention. I watched as Sarah frantically tried to decide what to take, what to leave behind. A life together, reduced to what could fit in her car. She made call after call to James, to friends, to her sister in another state. I could hear the desperation in her voice, the dawning realization that her carefully constructed plans were crumbling. James wasn't answering. Perhaps he was in a meeting, or perhaps he was already with his wife, about to face his own reckoning. Our mutual friends were reluctant to take her in once they learned what had happened. Her sister agreed to let her stay but lived 3 states away. Sarah left our home that night, mascara streaming down her face, looking back only once before driving away. I closed the door, sat down in my empty house, and waited for the next phase to unfold. I didn't have to wait long. By Monday morning, both Sarah and James had been called into HR. By afternoon, both had been terminated for violating the company's strict policy against relationships between managers and their direct reports. The evidence I had provided was irrefutable, but I wasn't done yet. I had discovered during my investigation that James was married too. His wife, Catherine, had no idea about the affair. I arranged to meet her at a cafe across town, bringing copies of the same evidence I had shown Sarah. Catherine was a quiet, dignified woman who listened without interruption as I explained everything. She was beautiful in an understated way, with intelligent eyes that remained dry even as I described the extent of the betrayal. When I finished, she thanked me, gathered the evidence, and left without making a scene. I respected her composure, her quiet strength in the face of such betrayal. Later, I learned she had changed the locks on their house and had her own divorce papers ready when James returned home. She had been more thorough than I had. She'd emptied their joint accounts completely, removed his name from their shared credit cards, and even canceled his gym membership. James arrived home to find his belongings in garbage bags on the front lawn and a security guard hired to ensure he didn't enter the property. Within a month, both Sarah and James had lost their jobs, their marriages, and most of their friends, many of whom had been mutual and chose sides after learning what had happened. They moved in together into a small apartment, forced to start over with the relationship they had thought would be their escape. That's when the real revenge began. With both of them unemployed and desperate, I pulled some strings through business contacts. I made sure that whenever James applied for a position in his field, the hiring manager somehow discovered his history of workplace misconduct. Not illegal, just a word in the right ear, a casual mention of his history. James Thompson? Oh, you might want to check with his previous employer about why he left. Just due diligence, you understand. One by one, promising job opportunities evaporated. Interviews that went well suddenly ended with polite rejections. His impressive resume and years of experience meant nothing in the face of his tarnished reputation. As for Sarah, I didn't actively sabotage her job prospects, but I didn't need to. In our industry, word travels fast. Her reputation was in tatters. Former colleagues who had once respected her now viewed her as untrustworthy, someone who had slept her way to promotions and special treatment. The few friends who had initially stood by her gradually drifted away as the full story emerged. They struggled financially. The stress of unemployment, the sudden downsizing of their lives, and the social isolation took its toll on their relationship. The passionate affair that had seemed so exciting in hotel rooms and stolen moments withered under the harsh light of day-to-day reality. I heard through mutual connections that they fought constantly. James blamed Sarah for their predicament, for not being more careful. Sarah resented James for not providing the life of luxury he had promised. Without the secrecy, without the thrill of sneaking around, their relationship revealed itself for what it truly was: a shallow connection built on lust and the allure of the forbidden. 3 months after Sarah moved out, I received my first text from her. She was sorry, she had made a terrible mistake. James wasn't the man she thought he was. Could we talk? I didn't respond. A week later, another message. She missed me. She missed our life. She had been stupid and selfish. James was controlling, jealous, nothing like the man she thought she was falling for. Could I ever forgive her? Again, silence. The messages continued, growing more desperate. She had left James. She was staying with her sister. She would do anything for another chance. She understood if I had moved on, but could we at least meet for coffee for closure? I saved every message but replied to none of them. Each plea for forgiveness, each admission of regret, each desperate attempt to reconnect was another small victory in my campaign of revenge. Meanwhile, I was rebuilding my life. I sold our house, Too Many Memories, and moved to a modern apartment downtown. I focused on my career, received a promotion, started traveling. I joined a gym, took up rock climbing, made new friends. I dated casually, not ready for anything serious but enjoying the company of women who knew nothing about my past. I heard that James had finally found work a sales position at a small company, far below his previous executive level with a fraction of his former salary. He had been forced to sell his luxury car to downgrade his lifestyle dramatically. Without his income and status, without the excitement of forbidden romance, his relationship with Sarah had collapsed completely. 6 months after Sarah left, I ran into her at a grocery store. It was bound to happen eventually in a city of our size. She looked thin, tired, her once vibrant appearance dulled by stress and unhappiness. She was buying discount pasta and store-brand cereal, a far cry from the organic, premium foods she had once insisted upon. She saw me before I could avoid her, her eyes lighting up with hope. She tried to talk to me there in the produce section, tears welling in her eyes as she asked if we could go somewhere to talk. "I've been trying to reach you," she said, her voice small. "I've sent so many messages." "I know," I replied, my voice neutral. "I made the biggest mistake of my life," she continued, reaching for my arm. I stepped back, avoiding her touch. "Nathan, please, just coffee. Just 10 minutes of your time." I looked at her, really looked at her, and felt something shift inside me. Not forgiveness, not yet, but the first loosening of the knot of hatred that had been driving me. She seemed so small now, so diminished. The woman who had once held my heart in her hands, who had crushed it without a second thought, now stood before me broken and pleading. "I have nothing to say to you, Sarah," I said finally. "Nothing that would help either of us." "I still love you," she whispered, tears spilling over. "I never stopped loving you. But you stopped respecting me," I replied. "You stopped honoring our vows, you stopped choosing me, and that's what matters." I left her standing alone among the apples and oranges, her quiet sobs following me down the aisle. I finished my shopping, paid, and walked to my car without looking back. That night I reflected on what my revenge had accomplished. Sarah and James had paid dearly for their betrayal. They had lost nearly everything. Part of me felt satisfied, vindicated. But another part recognized that the energy I was putting into revenge was keeping me tethered to the past, to the pain. I decided it was time to let go, not for Sarah's sake, but for my own. I stopped the subtle campaign against James's employment prospects. I blocked Sarah's number to end the cycle of pleading messages. I focused entirely on moving forward. I traveled, something Sarah and I had always talked about but never prioritized. I went to Japan, hiked Mount Fuji, and watched the sunrise from above the clouds. I spent a month in Italy, learning to cook authentic pasta dishes from a grandmother in Tuscany. I backpacked through South America, meeting people from all walks of life, hearing their stories, sharing parts of mine. The pain didn't disappear completely. There were still nights when I woke up reaching for someone who wasn't there. There were still moments when a song or a smell would trigger a memory so vivid it took my breath away. But those moments became less frequent, less overwhelming. A year after discovering the affair, I met Emma at a friend's birthday party. She was smart, funny, and carried none of the baggage of my past. A pediatric surgeon with kind eyes and a laugh that made everyone around her smile. We started dating slowly, cautiously on my part. I was transparent about my divorce but didn't dwell on the details. Emma had her own past heartbreaks, and we agreed to build something new together, something based on honesty and respect. Our relationship developed gradually, naturally. We didn't rush into living together or making grand declarations. We built a foundation of trust, first showing up when we said we would, being honest even when it was difficult, choosing each other day after day in small, meaningful ways. I learned that Emma had been engaged before, to a fellow doctor who had chosen his career over their relationship, who had consistently put her last until she realized she deserved more. We understood each other's hesitations, our careful approach to love. 6 months into our relationship, Emma got an offer to join a prestigious medical team in another city. It would mean a significant promotion, a chance to work with world-renowned surgeons. She told me immediately, presented it as a discussion, not a decision already made. "I want you to be part of this decision," she said, taking my hands in hers, "because you're part of my life now, and what happens to me happens to us." That simple act of inclusion, of consideration, healed something in me I hadn't realized was still broken. This was what partnership looked like. This was what respect felt like. 2 years after Sarah left, I proposed to Emma. We planned a small ceremony with just close friends and family. A week before the wedding, I received a handwritten letter from Sarah. She had heard about my engagement from a mutual friend. She wasn't asking for reconciliation anymore. She simply wanted to express her regret and wish me happiness. She was moving to another state, starting fresh. She hoped someday I could forgive her, not for her sake but for mine. I read the letter twice, then placed it in a drawer. I felt no urge to respond, but for the first time I also felt no anger when thinking of her. She had become just someone I used to know, a chapter closed. On my wedding day, standing across from Emma as we exchanged vows, I realized that true revenge wasn't about making Sarah and James suffer. It wasn't about destroying their lives or watching them struggle. It was about finding happiness despite their betrayal. It was about rebuilding a life so full and rich that the affair became nothing more than a distant memory, a detour on the road to where I was always meant to be. Emma and I honeymooned in Greece, spending sun-drenched days exploring ancient ruins and star-filled nights talking about our future. We discussed children, careers, dreams. We made plans and promises, both of us fully invested in keeping them. I never saw Sarah again. I heard through mutual friends that she had eventually found steady work in her new city, met someone new, built a quieter life. She had written a personal blog about infidelity and redemption, about the consequences of choices made in moments of weakness. It had gained a modest following, offering cautionary tales and hard-earned wisdom. James had struggled longer, his reputation in the industry permanently damaged. He eventually relocated overseas, starting over in a place where his past couldn't follow him. Last I heard, he was working for a small company in Australia, living alone in a beachside apartment, a shadow of the ambitious executive he once was. As for me, Emma and I bought a house in the suburbs, not unlike the one I had shared with Sarah, but this home was filled with truth and trust. When Emma told me she was working late, I never felt that twist of doubt in my stomach. When she guarded her phone, it was only because she was planning a surprise for my birthday. We built traditions together: Sunday morning pancakes, monthly date nights, summer hiking trips. We supported each other's careers, celebrated each other's successes, comforted each other through failures. We fought sometimes, of course all couples do, but we fought fair, without cruelty, without the intent to wound. 5 years after discovering Sarah's affair, Emma gave birth to our daughter. Holding that tiny life in my arms, I felt the last traces of bitterness dissolve. I had something now that was worth far more than revenge, a future built on real love. As our daughter grew, I watched Emma with her patient, loving, present in every moment. I saw in their relationship the family I had always wanted, the life I had nearly lost hope of finding. We welcomed a son 2 years later, completing our family. Our home was filled with laughter, with toys scattered across the floor, with the beautiful chaos of a life being lived fully. I sometimes think about what I would tell my younger self, the man who discovered his wife's betrayal and turned his pain into a calculated campaign of revenge. I would tell him that his plan would work. Sarah and James would indeed suffer the consequences of their actions. But I would also tell him that the real victory wouldn't be in watching them fall, but in rising himself from the ashes of that betrayal. That revenge is satisfying, but redemption is transformative. That sometimes the best revenge isn't about destruction at all, it's about construction. Building a life so good that the people who hurt you become irrelevant to your story. In the end, I didn't just survive Sarah's betrayal. I transcended it. I found a love deeper and truer than I had known before, built a family stronger for the lessons I had learned, created a life richer for having known pain. And that's a revenge sweeter than anything I could have planned.